Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year to everybody joining us today, and Happy New Year to you, Jeff. Michelle is out today, so it's the two of us, but that's okay. I hope everybody had a wonderful New Year. Did you do anything great, or did you just hang
Oh
out at home?
no, too old, too old. How about you?
I was asleep by 9:30 at night.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You survived Florida?
I have to say, I'm gonna.
Oh no, oh no.
No, no. Well, let's not go crazy. I had not been to Miami in 20 years, and Miami was actually nicer than I remembered it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like there's an energy there that for some reason makes me a little sad because it's kind of the energy that used to have in New York, and I feel like a lot of the New York energy is going down there.
Hmm.
But I've also never seen that kind of conspicuous consumption in my life. It's kind of except for like in Beverly Hills and Monaco. It's very
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
Anyway, so but while I was in Miami, while people were off for Christmas, the news never stops, and a lot of stuff I feel slid kind of under the radar this week, Jeff. That was
Yes, that's
that
the
was
story of the week. Is the stories that slid.
yeah, the stories that slid. And I want to start with our favorite whipping boy, CBS, because they deserve it. And we'll move on to others in the mainstream media in a second. But you had Tony, and you just told me how to pronounce his name, and of course I already forgot
Ducopel.
it.
He
Decopel.
went around. He ran around the train station carrying his name, challenging people to pronounce it, which is a little cute, but also a little egotistical.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, whatever. God bless. Like
Hmm.
that's great. But the part about him that I think is suspicious is that he basically went on, and we don't have the elements, unfortunately, because Michelle's not here to do this. But what he said in introing his new CBS Evening anchorship, which is starting this coming Monday, I believe, on the 5th, is he said, and I'm going to quote here: "On too many stories, the press has missed the story because we've taken into account the perspective of advocates and not the average American, or we put too much weight in the analysis of academics or elites and not enough on you." Thoughts?
Well, I'm a fake academic, not having a PhD, but I'm a journalism professor. It's ridiculous. It's this anti-elitist, anti-intellectual, anti-institutional view of the far right, and that's what he's representing. That's what Barry Weiss represents as well. That's why they're there together, and it's depressing as hell. I'm not surprised,
Yeah.
uh, but and I think and he is an advocate, and he has shown his advocacy on the morning show, uh, and we're going to see what he does. But then again, no one's going to be watching.
Yeah, there's a couple of thoughts I had about this. One is and I'm not the first to make this analogy, but it's sort of like getting onto an airplane and saying that the pilot's saying, we're not going to have experts fly this plane today. We're not listen to how you think this plane should be flown. Or more relevantly, because it's not really a life or death issue, although sometimes it can be, it's like investing money yourself versus having somebody who's a financial advisor invest it for you. Maybe you're good at investing, but it's a full-time job to figure out what's happening in the markets. And most of the time, you probably need somebody to invest it for you who knows what they're doing because that's their job. I'm not suggesting that the media always gets it right. In fact, most of the time they don't. But I am suggesting that there is something to be said for listening to the voices of people who know their stuff.
It's really interesting, Julie, as you're talking. I'm reminded of the early days of blogging,
Yeah.
when there was supposedly going to be citizen journalists, and the journalists would say, "Yeah, I want a citizen surgeon,"
Yeah.
and so the chorus at the time was, "No, we trust experts. Journalists find experts." In fact, journalists at their worst fancy themselves experts
Right.
when they're not. And so now what we see instead is a rejection of all of that and a claim to the common person. And I'm sorry, but Decopel is not the common man. But now he's going to claim to speak for. I'm just waiting for Spiro Agnew to come back from the dead and talk of the
Natter Nabob.
Nattering nabobs of negativism,
Yeah.
and the silent majority. The minority is very loud. The minority is ruling this country right now. And right now I'm doing research on mass media and mass culture, and I was just reading pieces from the Atlantic in the 30s where they complained about mass culture leaving out minorities. And at first I thought, in my present day age, I thought, well, how enlightened of them. They didn't mean that. What they meant was leaving out the high culture, leaving out the intellectuals and the elite, and that was the minority that was being ill-served by so-called mass culture. And in this country, we have trouble trying to figure out who is this country, and we keep on trying to act as if there's one public. There are and always have been many publics, and ideally, there are many publics in a diverse society that have their own expression and their own lived experiences, and that's what we should be sharing. And so, for him to come along in old, dying mass media and say, "I'm going to reject advocates," that is to say, people of interests, people who have interests, I'm going to reject academics and reject elites when he is an elite himself, is blind.
But what's the answer here? So let's assume that CBS is not going to scrap its evening news, although there's an argument to be made that the evening news is really antiquated. But let's assume that they're going to continue on to the path of the evening news, which I think is still probably profitable for the network to some extent, maybe not. And they're going to try to compete with David Muir, and they're going to try to compete with Tom Yamas, sorry, I was mispronouncing his last name. But on NBC and ABC, what would that look like to you? Because it is a dying medium, but yet if they're not going to get rid of it, what would a good newscast look like to you?
I just got an invitation today to participate in somebody's book in Europe on kind of future media. And one of the questions is what innovation we need.
Right.
We need such innovation as to throw out all that we had. I think the idea of a newscast, I never watch evening newscasts. And lately, during the holidays, when MSNBC has been doing nothing but repeats of Joe Scarborough and company, we've turned on to the evening newscast, and I forget about that future, that present active tense. Police tonight are, governments are doing this and that, and they try to make everything into a present tense. I'm listening to an interview with Katie Couric about her time, and she said when she went from the Today Show to CBS Evening News, she said people thought that I got lobotomized because I couldn't say anything because there wasn't time, there wasn't the structure, everything was a minute and a half at most. And I think that the form is dead. That's not to say that there isn't value in summaries, and all God's children are sending out email summaries of all the news today, and that has value, that curation has value. But I think the form is meaningless now. So I don't think I can imagine a good newscast, national or local. What would you think it would be?
Well, it's interesting because I also have not watched the evening news in a very long time, but I have a husband who does. He's a donkey, so he kind of always does what he's always done, which is watch the evening news. So sometimes when he gets home in time to turn on the evening news, he'll turn it on, and I'll be forced to sit there and watch it with him. And what I realized is, he'll watch David Muir on ABC. And what I've noticed that David Muir does, and I suspect it's because that's what tests best, is he'll always do a weather hit. He'll always report on the weather, like early on.
Oh, yeah.
Early on, they'll report on the weather, and then they'll find towards the end of the newscast, they'll find some sort of like, what makes America great, heartwarming segment, right? So somebody, created, I'm making this up, created cookies to feed homeless people in some little town somewhere in the Midwest, right? And I guess it's a formula that works in the sense that people want it to affect them, and the weather obviously affects everybody, regardless of where you live. Everybody, I always joke how people in California around this time of year, my friends always call me, tell me how warm it is in LA, or same in Florida. Everybody. So I guess everybody loves to watch the Schadenfreude that they have towards people who have bad weather. And then you have the heartwarming, what makes America great in the real sense of the word, little blurbs. But to me, that, and then sandwiched between that, you have, the strikes on Iran, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Washington. But it's so anodyne as to make it, they're almost afraid to take any kind of view, so they don't take a view at all. So they'll just report it, and then they'll still get shit for it because they'll still get accused of reporting only one side of it or another. I don't know, to be honest. I don't know what it looks like. I tend to agree with you. I think the days of the evening news are over, but I think it's prestige, and I think it's probably a financial asset for the network, and so they do it. But a financial asset, I don't know. I mean, if you look at the commercials there, like anywhere else, they're all for some sort of pharmaceuticals geared towards older people, which is the demographic that watches them.
Well, but at least they have commercials. So this is a rabbit hole for a second. But
Right.
we have MS Now. Look at that. I said MS Now. We have MS Now on pretty much all day, and CNN as well. I have FiOS cable, and neither Versant nor Verizon bother to sell us as an audience. So when I watch it, it's just constant give money to save children and pets,
Mm-hmm.
or PSAs about drugs, or that kind of stuff. They give it away, or they have one sponsor who's on, and they give them the whole month, and the whole month is just repeating commercials.
Right.
That is to say that we as an audience there are not valued at all. There's no value there. Now, when it comes to the evening news, there's still, yes, real sponsorship, but that too is sold in packages across the schedule. But that's dying. I think what will happen with CBS, I mean, this goes back many years when there were, I think it was, didn't Ted Turner try to buy CBS back in the day? Am I crazy to remember that?
Don't remember that, but he tried to buy everything. So
He tried to buy everything. And so I think the idea was that if you could combine CBS's broadcast presence at the time with CNN's news gathering, you'd have something profitable. And if Paramount does succeed, so far they're not, but if they do succeed in buying the parent of CNN, then CBS becomes a differently valued asset.
Because they have news gathering.
Because now there's CNN news gathering, and there's a chance to reach to expand the audience, and also with 60 Minutes, and of course you have Anderson Cooper on both platforms, but that would expand as well. So I think that would give some value. Otherwise, it's because CBS does not have a cable outlet, or hasn't had it. Whatever news gathering they have is expensive. I'm not sure it's worth it at all.
Yeah, and they do have news gathering. It's called 60 Minutes, although that's getting lobotomized. And to wrap up our little 60 Minutes / CBS conversation, do we think that this 60 Minutes segment will ever air, the one that was supposed to air? Do we think that that's actually something that they're going to ever show on 60 Minutes?
If it hadn't leaked, well, not leaked, if they hadn't stupidly put it out there and we all saw it, I think it would have aired lobotomized, to use your word.
Right.
Now Barry's really stuck because we're gonna dissect every comma that she changes in it. So I don't know. I'm going to guess she's going to try to completely remake the segment now, but then I would hope that the journalists would resist and we'll hear about it. What do you think?
I think it's dead. I think she's just going to hope that it kind of went away with 2025 and they're going to move on and it'll never be discussed again. Maybe. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, I hope.
Which to go to where you began our discussion is where too much of the media goes. I don't know if I'm jumping to where you were going to go, but just the fact that the Jack Smith testimony, 8 hours of testimony, was released on video on YouTube right in the middle of the holiday. You would hope that by now, on this Friday, we'd be seeing clips and clips and clips.
Nothing.
Ignored, forgotten.
Nothing.
Gone. And other news that we will probably discuss about Trump's health and about Trump and Epstein. The ADD of news is horrendous. And Ariana Huffington used to say, and I'm gonna get this wrong, she used to say that news has ADD and bloggers had ADHD. Bloggers wouldn't let loose of something, and the news forgets immediately. And I think that's what we see right now. So yeah, I think that Barry Weiss will probably be in luck, that nobody's going to go back and look and say, whatever happened to that segment, Barry?
Yeah. And by the way, I think that's absolutely right about what you said with respect to Jack Smith. I mean, Jack Smith testified and it was kind of dropped. And I'm not sure how many people here in the chat or anywhere watching later have seen this testimony, but to me, this was one of the most significant news events of 2025. And yet, especially as we come up on the 5th anniversary of January 6th, which is going to be Tuesday. And yet, it kind of, tree falling in the forest. They did it very smartly. They released it very smartly. And it's, the right wing, the MAGA sphere has a very, they figured out brilliantly how to play the news.
Yeah.
Either they flood the zone with so much that it kind of, nothing's important because everything's important, or they drop it on a Friday night, they drop it during a holiday week, they drop it at a time when people are on vacation, and therefore they assume nobody's going to pick it up when they come back from vacation because something new will come up. And it's every time. I mean, it's, you'd think if they tried it once, people would understand that this is what they do and then maybe pay attention to it. Like, if I'm in charge of CBS News or any other CNN, any other news network, I make my best people come to work on Friday afternoon, because that's when Trump drops everything.
Absolutely.
And yet, despite the fact that it's so patently obvious to us that that's what he does, they don't. It's like, oh, okay, it's the weekend, we got to go.
Here's the other part of it. It's more than 8 hours on YouTube. It's there. We can all watch it, but who's going to watch all 8 hours? I mean, a few of my social friends on the socials were, said, oh, I'm 2.5 hours in. This is why we need journalists to go through and find the good bits.
Right.
That's their job.
Right.
And I'm not seeing it. That video should be on the homepage of all the major news sites. It should be visible on the networks, and I'm hardly seeing any of it.
Yeah. And I just, I don't understand why, to the original point that we started off with Tony DeCoupel. I guess.
As in, you have to cope with him.
Oh, yes. Okay, well, that's a great way of doing it. So Tony DeCoupel, why he thinks that this is the kind of stuff that he's going to listen to. So he's going to listen to the loudest voices tell us what Jack Smith said, as opposed to doing what CBS should be doing, which is putting their entire newsroom on it and making sure that their entire newsroom goes through it. Look, I'm going to spend the weekend trying to watch all 8 hours of this, and I'm going to try to glean what I can from it, and I'm going to try to interpret it the way that I want to interpret it. Having said that, it shouldn't be me and just me. It shouldn't be just your friends on social media. It should be all of us.
And by the way, as an antidote to the depression that comes with that, you said you watched clips of, but I recommend watching Mamdani's entire inauguration speech. It was amazing. It was quite wonderful. And there too, I wish I were seeing, I have the TV over to the side here. I wish I were seeing the clips on constantly, because it was an important event. Instead, we have John Kasich, why they have him on MSNBC all the time, I do not understand. He's on the day side when that's right. The conservative side of the network. He's there saying, "Oh, nobody pays attention to New York. Nobody cares about New York."
That's great, because on the other hand, you have every other MAGA person saying, "Oh, not John Kasich, sorry, that Zohran Mamdani, he's the face of the Democratic Party now."
Right.
Right. He's a Democratic socialist. He hates Israel. I'm paraphrasing them. Right. He's a Democratic socialist. He hates Israel. He's all about, I forgot this line that he had, where basically like not about rugged individualism, but now we're all about communion or whatever he said. I forgot what it was. But effectively, he's not American. He's foreign, so on and so forth. That's the problem.
Right. And it was an amazing talk. It was an amazing event. It was. I haven't felt. I didn't necessarily mean to hit off on this rabbit hole, but I just want to just add that if folks out there haven't watched it, watch, and if you can watch as much as possible. I switched on to C-SPAN, which had the New York One feed, so it wasn't interrupted by commentary at every turn. And you saw, I don't know if you ever watched the PS22 kids. There's this great music teacher at PS22 in Staten Island, and they came on to sing Bread and Roses as a labor theme was sung. The other speeches were wonderful. Watching Bernie was having a ball with his guy winning. It really brought me a hope that I haven't felt in a long time.
Yeah. I mean, what can what can I say other than it's interesting, because there's almost two paradigms, right? The two paradigms are totally different. It's you've got red America and coastal America, and they have two completely different perceptions of what this is.
Which, is kind of okay. It's again, it goes back to the problem that we try to act as if there's one America and we all have to agree, we all have to be the same. And it's the melting pot myth that I grew up with, which is fundamentally racist. We are a pluralistic society. That is the benefit of what we are. We do have different lived experiences and different perspectives. And the more that we can celebrate that and give voice to that, and listen to that, the better.
Yeah. And the problem is that we now have two Americas in the media as well, where you've got one America that's completely just not even remotely acknowledging the other exists, right? Or when they acknowledge it exists, you have something like New York Post that now is I opened it today and it was like, what did Zora Mondani's wife wear, to the inauguration? She wore a pair of boots that, despite the fact that he's a socialist, is, super expensive. And that's a problem. I mean, that's a problem because you've got one side trashing the other. You've got the other side trying to trash the other unsuccessfully. I think the right wing does it much better than the left wing does.
Mm-hmm.
But nevertheless, you were not even reading from the same choir book anymore, which is problematic.
No.
It's a big problem.
There was a wonderful line that I pulled out from his speech. I'm trying to find it right now. For too long, those fluent in the good grammar of civility have deployed decorum to mask agendas of cruelty. Just a wonderful line from his speech. He's going to be great to watch. I think he does represent the future of the Democratic Party.
I hope so. I mean,
I've got to confess, I go back to the days where Bernie Bros drove me nuts, but Bernie was right about so much.
Let me say this about Bernie. I was a Hillary person. I was a Hillary person the second time.
Yep, same here.
I was a Biden person. I absolutely 100% did not subscribe to Bernie Sanders. But now he was right. He was right. AOC was right. And I will say this, I align much more with Chuck Schumer ideologically than I do with AOC. But I will tell you this, if she runs against him, I'm voting for AOC.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that's a big problem. I mean, that's a big problem for where we are today, because where we are today, unfortunately, we are absolutely, positively being governed by not the Bernie Bros and not by the Bernie people. Not the Bernie Bros shouldn't be governing anybody, but not the Bernie views. But Bernie was right. And, I keep wondering if Bernie were the nominee against Trump, whether Bernie would have won. And the answer is, I mean, probably.
Yeah, who knows?
Probably. Because what you have is people who are clamoring for somebody who's going to call it like it is, which Bernie does. People who are populist, which Bernie is. People who I think come through with what they promise, which unfortunately the Democratic Party always finds a reason why it can't do something as opposed to finding a reason to do something.
See Chuck Schumer.
See all of them. I mean, see Joe Biden. I mean, Joe Biden got a lot of stuff done in the first term, but he didn't know how to sell it, and he didn't know how to say, you know what, F you, I'm going to do what I wanted to do. I got a mandate. I'm going to do it.
I've got a question for you. So Hochul was there, and Mamdani acknowledged her. I think he would have been wise to have done more than just acknowledge her. Afterwards, I saw her come over and she gave him a hug. In her mind, I think she's got to be sitting there saying, "Oh, Jesus, look at this incredible crowd, all this incredible enthusiasm." I think she blocks him at her political peril. I think she saw a powerhouse there that she can't just stand back and say, "Well, you got to come through me." She's got to go through him now.
Oh, you know what? He's got a problem. She's got a problem.
Yeah.
Because he made a lot of promises, and he made a lot of promises that he has to keep. And the only way he keeps them is if the state allows him to keep them.
Yep. But she, on the other hand, if she wants to, if she comes off blocking him, she's going to lose New York City and she's going to lose the office. And I think that I think the first thing will be childcare, and everybody seems to be gathering around saying yes, at some level, childcare is important and is going to be supported. She'll try to stop them at free buses probably, but because upstate they won't care about that. But I think childcare, he may push that through because of the power that the people gave him.
Maybe, but I will say this to you: he's got to go through a legislature, and we're a little off the media now. He had the media that unfortunately he absolutely not the media, sorry. Yeah, I'm trying to do two things at the same time, which is I'm having a little crisis with my son who's texting me nonstop. He needs the legislature. He must have the legislature to do any of this stuff. And unfortunately, he can't do it. He cannot do it.
Yep.
Without the legislature. The legislature is not based, it's not New York based, right? It's based statewide.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
And upstate's a different country. Yeah.
Yeah.
So back to the media. I think you and I both looked at the Wall Street Journal and its coverage of Trump this week. And there were a few fascinating things there. One, I'll start here. One was what they led with online yesterday was a story about Trump and Epstein, or day before yesterday. And the headline, the way they presented the story was, "This is why Trump barred Epstein from Mar-a-Lago." But the lead of the story and the essence of the story was very, very different. The story was that for years, Mar-a-Lago, thus Trump, trafficked young women, maybe girls, from the spa at Mar-a-Lago with house calls to Epstein. Trump trafficked.
Yep.
That should have been the headline. It was the lead. It should have been in news everywhere. But you could see in the way the story was presented, even though they made it the lead story, even though they had the details, even though they had it there, they softballed it in a ridiculous way. And then the second story that the Journal did was about Trump's health, and was arguing that they were playing stenographer to his contentions about his health. Yeah, he's old. Yeah, his eyes are closing.
That story was complete bullshit, because the headline of that story, which I think is really relevant to this discussion, there were two headlines that the Wall Street Journal ran, right? And I'm going to pull them up in a moment. So, one of these headlines was basically that Trump's health is just fine, right?
Yeah.
The headline from this week was, "As signs of aging emerge, Trump responds with defiance." Well, defiance to me connotes vigor. It connotes strength. It connotes a guy who's with it, right? The same Wall Street Journal back in 2024, June 4th, 2024. Receipts, right? Just a few months before the election. "Behind closed doors, Biden shows signs of slipping." Right?
Yep.
And I believe the byline was both. Well, it's not really, the headlines are not written by the journalists, but the byline was both, with the same for some of the journalists covering this. And so I think what's upsetting here is not the Wall Street Journal being in the tank for Trump. We already knew that, despite the fact that sometimes they show and display some courage. But the headline of this is that people just are like, "Oh, okay, no problem." I mean,
he's fine.
It's fine. Look, if you read that story, despite the fact that they basically tried to do everything they could to make him look like a vigorous, healthy man, it's obvious that he's not. And they gave him every opportunity to say, "Oh, yes, it's because, I take a lot of aspirin, and the aspirin thins out my blood, and that's why I have all these bruises on my hand, and that's why listen, I'm not a doctor. I don't want to speculate about people's health. I think I know what he's got, because I've got a family member going through the same thing. I think he's got Alzheimer's, and I think that MRI that he got, which apparently was not an MRI, was, as he said, a preventative MRI. I think that was a PET scan to make sure that the medicine they're giving him, which scrapes the plaque off the brain, is not making him have internal brain bleeding, which is something they routinely do for this new class of medicine that they do. The medicine is administered much like chemo. It's administered intravenously. So I think that's what you're seeing with the hand. I mean, everything adds up. And the fact that he keeps talking about the fact in this article that he's got good genes, which to me is so Nazi adjacent that I can't even talk about it. And so everybody's going to say to me, "Stop analogizing him to Nazis." Well,
you're absolutely right.
You should probably stop sounding like one, because I don't recall whoever else talks about good genes besides Nazis. That is literally eugenics. But if you're going to talk about his good genes and allow him to talk about his good genes, can we also talk about the fact that genetically his father had Alzheimer's, his sister, which they don't acknowledge, but I promise you, she died with Alzheimer's. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, either his brother or his uncle, one of them, died of Alzheimer's as well. He's got a tremendous amount of dementia in his family genetically. Does that mean that he's going to get it? Not necessarily. Are there higher markers for people who have family members who've had Alzheimer's also getting it? Sad to say, yes, that's true.
Yeah,
And
and they also just accepted, if we go back to our discussion about
yeah,
decouple and experts, they
yeah,
didn't go to the experts
no,
sufficiently and say, so we talked about his thin blood. It's better to have thin blood. Well, it has nothing to do with the viscosity of your blood. It's a different vision of what they're talking about, and they accepted his BS about he's not really sleeping. They catch me when I'm blinking. Yeah, and so on and so forth. And so it was just a BS report, top
it
to
was a
bottom.
total BS report. And I think the part that upsets me about this is that they just acted, as you said, a stenographer, did not go to the experts, let him effectively bulldoze them into printing what he wanted, did not remotely even mention the family history that he has, which may or may not be relevant. But if you're going to be talking about genes, you've got to talk about it.
Yep.
If he listen, like, I don't want to be like a lawyer, but he opened the door, Your
Right.
Honor.
Exactly.
He opened the door to having this discussion about his family. And let's put this all in context. He is now allegedly still suing. Is he still suing the Wall Street Journal for some absurd amount of
I
money?
think so. I don't think he's dropped it. Yep.
Right. Doesn't drop the suit. And yet he's still sitting down with them, and he's still allowing Rupert Murdoch to come to state dinners, who's the owner of the Wall Street Journal. And the whole thing is basically kabuki theater.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're trying to curry favor with him in order to, I don't know whether they want to, for whatever reason, right? Now, I know some of these reporters, they're very, like Josh Dossey's not a pushover. He's a great reporter. He was on the byline here. But I don't even think it's necessarily what they reported, whether as to how it was edited or certainly how the headline was put into place. But you cannot escape the side-by-side comparisons here. You just cannot do it of one headline that says that behind closed doors, Biden shows signs of slipping, and then just over a year later.
But it's not behind closed doors. It's out for all of us to see. He's slipping
Yeah,
like crazy, and they're not acknowledging the slippage.
they're not acknowledging slippage. And they say, well, he falls asleep sometimes, and his attitude is, oh, no, the cameras just get me when I'm mid-blink. Oh, okay.
He
Okay.
works so hard.
Yeah, I mean, yes. And that he works 10 to 6, but he works, he spends his mornings working upstairs in the residence and only comes down to the Oval Office at 10 o'clock. And he's got this, and they kind of, without any kind of pushback, he's got this crazy schedule, and they're trying to make his schedule less crazy because they're trying to make it more important rather than quality over quantity. And all of it was just such an effort to make him look vigorous, despite the fact that he's the oldest man ever to assume office.
And, as you're talking here, I'm reminded, we talked about this, I think, 2 weeks ago, Jamel Bouie's column about how he's a cipher and it's the power behind the throne. It's the junta, my word, that's there, Stephen Miller and company, the Project 2025 agenda. And so they're just rolling over this shell of a man.
Yeah.
And so the worst damage is being done by the junta. However, as we also know, they allow him his moments of authoritarian dictatorial power, and he does damaging, horrible things because he's nothing. So on both sides, on the fact that they can use him, he's diminished, he's slipped, and the fact that he can then still do crazy crap because he's of diminished mind. It's a huge story, and it's not been covered by anyone, and the Journal is just one of them. I'm old enough to remember when people say, oh, the editorial board of the Journal is awful, but the Journal newsroom is great. And yes, there are good reporters there, including the one you just named. But you look at what's telling about these two stories is how the leadership of the newsroom chose to present them. They soft pedaled both of these stories.
Yes. And I think what's also completely astounding to me is that they use as an example that, unlike Joe Biden, who was really kept away from the press by his aides and because he was obviously losing it, I mean, they all but say it in those terms, Donald Trump speaks to the press every day, sometimes several times a day. There's a difference, right? There's a difference between, and I'm not suggesting Joe Biden's aides behave well, because Biden should have been speaking to the press a lot more. So I'm not at all excusing that. However, whether it's Joe Biden or Barack Obama or George Bush or Ronald Reagan, or you name any president prior to George Bush, before they met the press, before they stood up at a press conference, they were briefed, they were very careful about what they said because they understood what they said would move markets, it would move foreign adversaries, it would move our allies, and they had to be very careful about parsing every single thing that they said. And that's not just presidents. I'm a former Senate communications director. I would not have put a senator in front of the press unless there was a massive amount of briefing. Just because you can stand up and spout off with your crazy, insane, literally, because I think he is crazy. That's not a medical diagnosis, but I think it's fairly obvious. Ability to just bullshit, and somehow that's a plus for you. I guess. I mean, that's like me getting, drinking a bottle of scotch right now and going on Twitter and tweeting, and people are saying, "Oh, look at her. She's so out there. She's so accessible to people because she's out there tweeting." Sometimes you shouldn't tweet after you drink, right? And sometimes you shouldn't stand up and talk to the press.
I used to have what I call my Chardonnay rule. That after you've had too much Chardonnay, you shouldn't go on Twitter. But then I found the loophole, which is Merlot.
No drinking and tweeting at all. Absolutely.
No. But as you're talking again, I'm thinking I'll defend Biden's staff for a moment. To this extent, every single time Biden put himself out there for the press, he got smashed. He was everything was nitpicked to an extreme. Everything was judged to an extreme. It was never worth it for him to be out there with the press. With Trump, sure, he's out there with the press all the time because nothing bad happens to him as a result. Because they're stenographers or they're admirers or they're afraid of labeling what they see. So for Trump, yeah, he might as well be out there all the time. It's a party.
Yeah, I think the problem is that you're also talking about how it's presented. It's not just that he's out there in front of stenographers or out in front of people who are friendly to him. It's that it's presented as though this is a plus for him to go in front of the press and call a woman Miss Piggy. Well, hey, let's not pay attention to what he actually says to the press. Let's just talk about the fact that he's talking to the press, because they're so into access, these people, that they don't care how they get access as long as they get it. Right? Because the president of the States knows my name. Therefore, I love him. That's what it is. It's about the fact that he knows who they are. He spars with them. And by sparring with, listen, I will tell you right now, when I worked at Fox News, there were people who were loving the fact that Trump will call them out even when he trashed them.
Yeah.
Because he knew them and that made them important.
Yep.
That has not changed.
No.
That has not changed. And they love the fact that he calls them out and he talks to them, and that makes them feel important. And so therefore pay no attention to what the content of what he says is. As long as he says it and speaks to you, it justifies their existence. Because if the president didn't speak to them, what's the point of being in the White House briefing room?
And so I want to raise up for a second here. The problem that we're identifying with the Journal is that they're not acknowledging and labeling his insanity, his poor health, his poor state of mind. And then one of my hobby horses when we talk every week, which is great because it lets me get out of my system, it's therapeutic, is the Times refuses to label things. And this week they had one story about Trump and his brand. He's throwing his brand on things, Trump Kennedy Center and such. And they acknowledge that authoritarians do that, but they won't go to the next step and catalog all the ways in which he's authoritarian. They're constantly trying to go around in this Times thesaurus. The other story that drove me nutty was a great story. They did a beautiful visualization of all the corruptions going on with Trump and his family and his key aides and how they're making a fortune doing all this stuff. And they spent a lot of reporting effort on it. They spent a lot of time on it. It was impressive. But the word corruption didn't appear. It did appear actually in a hidden part of the visualization, but referring not to Trump, but to another government. They didn't mention corruption about Trump. They didn't mention emoluments. They didn't discuss legality. They didn't go to their fabled experts to have experts say this is all illegal. Experts say this is all corrupt. Experts say this is bad for democracy. They didn't even bother to do that. They won't label it.
Nothing. It's the same way they wouldn't label him a liar. Remember in the first term, how long did it take them to label him a liar? Yep. Right? He was literally lied, but that's just not done. I mean, they have their New York Times standards. It's just not done. I mean, what strikes me about the Times, which I still think to this day is still the indispensable outlet, because because in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
Mm-hmm.
But they're still operating like 15 years behind the Times. I just don't understand it. Like, after everything you've learned, after everything you've seen,
Yes.
after the interregnum where you had 4 years of seeing things go back to normal that basically underscored the insanity that happened the 4 years prior, and that underscore what is happening today. Like, you've basically had shock therapy for 4 years that shocked you back into understanding how completely crazy 2015 through 2020 was. And then you had 2021 through 2024, where you saw how things could be again. And then again, you're basically being put back into the boiling water, and you still aren't willing to label things the way they are. I mean, if this were any foreign government that the New York Times was writing about, they would be calling for election monitors. They would be calling for, God knows. I mean, they would be saying this is not a military junta, but a coup. I don't know how else they would label it as to what's happening right now. It's an extra constitutional government.
Yes.
And then you have not just the Times, but you have ABC. Speaking of, we just talked about the ABC Nightly News, which referred to the Kennedy Center as the Trump Kennedy Center.
Even CBS didn't do that.
Yes. Says who? Says who? It is legally he has no authority to just change the name.
Even throw a so-called at it. Put square quotes around it. Something.
But it's not the Gulf of America just because he calls it the Gulf of America. No. It's not the Trump Kennedy Center.
That's how he shows that we're his that's what I'm trying to come up with the word I should use.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're going to say. His bitches, right? Like, that's what we are.
Thank you. You could say it. I couldn't.
Yeah, but I mean, seriously, like, is it the Roginski Lincoln Center? Because, I mean, just because I say it is doesn't mean it is.
Right.
Like, what are you talking about here? Why?
And so when the Times writes about that, it's this, he's branding everything. It's a branding thing. It's some kind of exercise. And it's almost as if they're doing it to poke us in the eyes. We critics are out here. They hear it. They know that this is a criticism. They know this lack of labeling is a criticism. They also know that both sidesing is a constant criticism. Here's the headline that had me screaming this week. New College of Florida was progressive. Then Governor DeSantis overhauled it. We can deal with the word overhaul in a second, but that's fine. Subhead. At the state school, gender studies is out. The Odyssey is required reading. A Charlie Kirk statue is coming. Has one ideological bubble replaced another? It's classic both sidesing, right? Where what they're doing is they're equating liberal education and gender studies with Charlie Kirk as a racist, and they're calling each an ideological bubble.
Yep.
And a Charlie Kirk story is then equal to teaching students about gender. Good God.
I mean,
and they're not stupid. They're not blind. They're not deaf. They hear the criticism, and yet they go on and put this kind of stuff in there as if to say, screw you all.
I got to tell you, there was a city in Russia and into the early years of the Soviet Union that was called Tsaritsyn, which was named basically a play on the word czar, right? In 1925, it was renamed. And it was renamed, who was the leader in 1925? Joseph Stalin was just coming up. It was renamed to Stalingrad. That's what he did.
Yep.
And that's what autocrats do.
Yep.
They rename cities after themselves while they're alive. And how, you and I always joke about how I drive past where you live on my way to Pennsylvania every week. But that Trump Bedminster, which is the golf course that he owns not very far from where you live, Jeff, is a couple of towns down the road, is a town called Clinton, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful little town. If anybody ever has any reason to be in Clinton, New Jersey, you should check it out. It's a really nice town. I have not once, but many times thought about the fact that because Donald Trump, I don't know if he ever goes west past his golf course. I don't know if he would ever have occasion to. But at which point he drives past Clinton, New Jersey, and in his mind will say, "Oh, Bill Clinton, screw that," which of course it wasn't named after him. It was named after General Clinton in the Civil War, but in the Revolutionary War, but whatever. Never mind that. I want to change this to Trump, New Jersey. It's only a matter of time until he starts changing names, and he's going to.
Oh yeah.
Say that's what it is. And are we all supposed to call it that now? Right. Is it going to be Stalingrad again?
And supposedly he's going to start constructing not only the ballroom, but also the Arc de Triomphe of Washington. And you know it's going to have that gold crap all over it, and it's going to say Trump on it. You just know it.
And it's going to have the same way the Arc de Triomphe has bas relief of different Napoleonic victories. This one's going to have people storming the Capitol to liberate it on January 6th.
God knows, as crazy as that sounds, it's probably right.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, I have said this from day one, and I really mean it. I will not, if I were running a presidential campaign right now, I would tell my client, whoever it is, that the first thing they need to do is say that as their first executive order, they are going to blow up that ballroom. I don't care what it costs or how much money went into building it. They're going to tear down that arc. They're going to get rid of all that gold shit off the Oval Office.
Oh, yes.
They're going to demo that stupid Presidential Hall of Fame, Walk of Fame, whatever the hell it's called, and eradicate every last trace of Trumpism. And if he decides he's going to put his face on Mount Rushmore, which although I think it's very hard to do because of the structure of Mount Rushmore, I wouldn't be surprised if he tried. Blow the whole thing up. I don't care if you blow up all of the rest of it. We need to get a wrecking ball in there as a symbol to the fact that Trumpism is dead. You just get rid of it. And I've said this before, and I mean it. We need to do politically, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm advocating for real nuclear war, but we need to do politically and symbolically what we did to Hiroshima and World War II and to bombing the shit out of Dresden. You need to show that we're not screwing around. Because otherwise, the press will still have this, and you know what's going to happen. Some Democrats going to come in there, yes, the ballroom, yes, but, we also built a bunker underneath, and there's a lot of things, and we always needed a ballroom. I don't care if this is the most useful ballroom on earth. I don't care if this is the most useful bunker on earth. I don't care what it is. If he did it, and he did it extrajudiciously because he did not go through protocol to do it, it's got to go, or else we're not a nation of laws.
Well, look, what Mamdani did, his first executive order was to invalidate all of Adams' executive orders since he was indicted.
Yep.
Kind of brilliant.
And you have the New York Post now and others talking about how, this is really terrible because he's gotten rid of the stuff that protects Jews. And you know what my attitude is? Then go back and redo those executive orders. Go back and redo them.
Yeah.
But you do not, you just say none of this is legitimate and I'm getting rid of it.
Well, of course, the most illegitimate thing we have from this era is our Supreme Court.
Yes.
And it was wishful thinking to think that Biden would have ever done anything about it. But if we don't reform the court in the future, again, we're going off media, we're going to be nowhere. But but back to media, where is the support for that idea? Where's the shouting that says this is wrong? I'll give you another one, a story that got ignored this week. The U.S. Postal Service, even post DeJoy, now that he's gone, the U.S. Postal Service just said, we're not going to postmark things when you give them to us. We'll postmark them when we bloody well want to get around to it.
Yeah,
what does that do to mail-in voting? It is at every possible turn, they try to subvert voting and thus democracy. And where's the shouting about this? Because unless there's going to be shouting, it's not going to be reversed. That is media's role. They must advocate, sorry, Tony DeCopel, for democracy, for voting rights, for the Constitution, and they don't.
But see, that's the problem, Jeff, and I think you just nailed it. And I think that's the problem with the media that we have today, is that you've got a media that both sides everything. They're now both siding democracy, right?
Yes.
They're both siding democracy. And I got into a ton of crap when I wrote last week. I think we talked about this last week. When I wrote that what would have happened to Bari Weiss if she had been a editor for, Der Spiegel or whoever, I don't know, or Der Stürmer, probably not Der Stürmer, but whoever existed back in the 1930s in Berlin, and people from Dachau, before we even got to the Jews, right? The communists, the union tradesmen, all the people that were sent there initially back in 1933 or 1934. Somebody had escaped and had said to her, here you go. Here you go. Here's what happened to us. Would she have held that story to see what, somebody in the Nazi hierarchy wanted to comment on it, whether they did or not? And the rash of crap that I got from that analogy, oh my God, she's a Jew. How can you say this? This is terrible. Don't analogize anything to Nazis. But that's exactly what's happening here, right? We're both siding so much that we're both siding unacceptable stuff. To your point, democracy is being both sides now, right? Extrajudicial illegal rendering of people to concentration camps is being both sides now.
Yes.
Everything is both sides. The media has now decided they're going to play things so down the middle. And so the Overton window moves and it moves and it moves and it moves more and more.
And now it's smashed. It's just gone. Right. Well, and it's even beyond both sides. And I don't know if I said this some weeks ago. When I was young and first started studying the Holocaust and the Nazis, my presumption, my trained worldview from birth was that everyone wants democracy. And the realization that the Nazis found democracy to be an evil to be eradicated was eye-opening. Like you could be against democracy. Of course they were. They were by their actions, but they were also by their words. The difference now is these present-day fascists have media fooled, that they're talking as if they're just redoing democracy a little bit. They're just throwing a little gold leaf on it. No, they don't like democracy. They hate democracy. They're trying to destroy democracy. And that story is not getting covered. And they do it again and again and again. And so postmarks in the post office might seem like not a big deal, might seem like a small thing, but it's part of the larger strategy that is right before their eyes. And they don't label it. They don't explain it. They don't cover it.
They don't care. And it's fascinating because I don't know why they think they're going to somehow have immunity in this brave new world that exists. And they're going to be the first to either put up or get out.
Yep.
And right now they're putting up, right? Right now they're going along with what they need to get along with. And it's not just their media handlers. Like, I'd like to know who at ABC made the decision to call it the Trump Kennedy Center. Who told them to call it the Trump Kennedy Center? Was there a memo that, hey, if you're at ABC and you want to let us know, let us know? Was there a memo that went out that said, from now on, here are the guidelines. We're referring to it as the Gulf of America, and we're referring to it as the Trump Kennedy Center.
Yep.
Because legally, it is not the Trump Kennedy Center. As I said, I could call it the Roginski Lincoln Center. It doesn't mean that you're going to go see the ballet at the Roginski Lincoln Center. You're going to see it at Lincoln Center. But, just because he has the ability to get federal workers to put his name on a building doesn't mean that it's legal. It doesn't mean that it needs to be acknowledged. Doesn't mean that it's not a complete repudiation of our rules and our norms and our laws, because this is a law. It was named the Kennedy Center by an act of Congress. Does that not mean anything anymore?
No. Well, Congress has given up its authority, so that's where we are.
Congress might have, but is the media not acknowledging that Congress still has at some point had authority to name something? Yep. Does Congress no longer acknowledge that the post office, does the media no longer acknowledge that the post office is being told not to postmark something, not because, we're not even living in reality anymore. You drop something off the post office and it's being postmarked and it's been sent out. I understand it may not be delivered for a while, but they're not even trying to change the law to say, oh, okay, you know what? We got to process, because there's state laws, right? So different states have different ways in which they count mail-in ballots. So they, rather than having to deal state by state by state, they're just saying, never mind, if it's not postmarked, we could deal with it.
And it's more than that. It's your taxes. It's legal documents. It's the standard by which things are timed for a submission. And they're just changing that willy-nilly, and that's that. And all of this, since all I do is complain about the media, I want to give one kudo to The Guardian, which is my salvation most times. I love The Guardian. And they had a year-end story compiling the worst of Donald Trump's misogynistic and racist quotes. That's what they should be doing all the time.
Yeah.
And so God bless it, someplace did it. But now that having given a kudo, let me give a brickbat, if I may. John McWhorter, who is the Blackberry Weiss, constantly
prides himself on it.
Prides himself on it, exactly. and had a column this week, and his columns are to say they're anodyne would be nice. And I regret that when it came to linguistics, I used to enjoy his work and I used to admire his voice. Now it's just awful. He had a column this week. These are the 10 old television series every kid needs to watch. So that alone is a nostalgia to a white hegemonic culture of time in this country. That's bad enough. I love Lucy. I love Lucy too. I still love Lucy. Fine. All in the Family. Okay. Nice liberal show. Then we get down to number 4, the Amos and Andy show. Here is a black man recommending that children should watch Amos and Andy. I can't believe it. And I can't believe that no editor at the time said, no, you're really not going to say that. No, you can't. No, come on. It's ridiculous. Drop it on anyone. It was funny, he says.
I mean, Amos and Andy was racist, by the way, both by modern standards and by the standards of people who criticized it at the time.
Yes.
It was built on complete minstrel stereotypes, right?
Right.
Black characters existed only as caricatures. And, you know, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the NAACP protested the show back in the day. I mean, back then, not even now. It's not even like hindsight being 2020. I mean, at the time, you know, if you think it's funny, I don't know. I mean, it's not for me to tell a black man what he should consider funny when it comes to racism, but I think it would make me uncomfortable if I were to watch that show.
It's terrible, and terrible that they allow that in. All of which goes to reflect on, I think everything we've talked about this week is about the bad judgment in newsrooms, how things are presented, what they're presented, and how they're done. And, you know, as a journalist myself and as a journalism educator, one of the mythical tropes that we ascribe to ourselves is news judgment. As a teacher with other journalism teachers, we'd say, well, the hardest thing to teach kids is to know what a story is. And that is a position of power, that we as the journalists get to decide what the story is and how it's presented and who's in it and what they get to say and how it begins and how it ends. That notion of the storyteller is a position of power. That notion of positioning is a position of power. That idea of news judgment as a peculiar talent, an art, a God-given gift that we journalists have, unlike everybody else, is a claim to power. And they're screwing it up. They have terrible judgment at the end of the day. And again, you and I both said there are good reporters at these publications and these networks. But the way their work is then presented, when the Wall Street Journal presents a story about Donald Trump trafficking young women and it's not presented that way, when his corruption is presented but not labeled, they display terrible judgment.
Well, and, you know, you talked about judgment, but it's also, to go to Tony DeCople. I'm trying to cope. We got to cope with it. Tony DeCople's point about how we need to, you know, I guess be more populist is kind of a shortcut of what he's saying. To what you said about voting and what you said about the IRS and what you talked about having the postmark on it, good luck filing your taxes.
Yeah.
Good luck. Because you can go ahead and say that you dropped that on April 15th, and they're going to say, oh, no, we didn't get it until, you know, the postmark here says April 22nd.
And especially if you're from a blue district.
If you're from a blue state or just somebody that they want to get, right? So either you file online, which I guess if you have the ability to do, you can. But the reality is a lot of people, especially a lot of older people, don't file online when they do their own taxes, not with their
well, here, folks, is the other thing you can do. Yeah. And I feel bad because it's gonna affect the line you stand into the post office. It's going to affect the employees. But you have the right when you go in there to say, I want you to postmark this now. And my wife has done that in the past with taxes and such. I want to make sure it's postmarks. I want you to take out the postmark. I want you to postmark it in front of me.
Yeah.
And you still have that right for now to do. And so if they're not going to postmark properly, folks, demand it.
Right. But I mean, most people just drive,
Oh,
drive through
drop it
and
off.
yeah, just put it in the
And,
post.
and that's not the real issue. What we're really talking about here is the media coverage of this.
Right.
They
And
pull this kind of shit and
and
they get
that's
away with it
that's
because
the
we're
problem.
not watchdogging them.
We're not watchdogging them. And they, for all that they talk about being the voice of the people and being populist, hey, Tony DeCopel, here's a good one. Why don't you talk about this? Because this actually affects your viewers.
Yeah.
This actually, you don't have to talk to experts about it. Talk to the regular, go talk to a man on the street and ask that man on the street, hey, when you drop your taxes off in a mailbox on April 15th, thinking it's going to go to the IRS because you made the deadline, do you expect to get screwed on it because they're not going to postmark it 2 days later, 5 days later, 10 days later, whenever they get around to it? Of course. It's not just about voting. It's
No.
not just about voting. It's taxes. It's so much more. And of course, people who have the money to pay for something to be certified mail or any other way, or to go online or to have accountants do it, don't have this problem. But this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about the media ignoring at their peril things that affect
Yes.
everyday Americans, who
Yes.
they refer to as everyday Americans, who I refer to as regular people because I hate that term. But these are regular people who are getting screwed by
Yep.
this administration. So if Tony DeCopel wants to be a man of the people, you could start with that.
So I got a question for you.
Yes.
Are you gonna you didn't watch the Barry Weiss thing, which is a mark of sanity.
Which Barry
The
Weiss thing?
whole Barry Weiss Erica Kirk, right? You didn't watch the whole thing.
Actually, I ended up watching all of
You
it.
did end up watching it. Oh, okay. All right. All right.
I
Well,
went back.
that's good. That's your
I went back. I had to because I did a column on it, so I had to.
well. As people say when I all the time online when I'm sharing Broken Times, Broken Post, Murdoch Journal. Why are you doing this? I say I'm watching so you don't have to.
Yeah. No.
Is that right? So here's my question: are you going to watch Tony DeCopel Monday night?
No.
No, I don't
No.
plan to either.
No, because I wouldn't watch him anyway, and I'm not interested in the nightly news. I'm not.
Yeah.
It's not my thing. I don't think most people get their news from the nightly news. I think most people now get their news right here on their phones.
Yep.
And what Tony DeCopel chooses to do is not of particular interest to me. At best, he's going to emulate the number one newscast in the nation, which is ABC, and it's going to be a lot of weather and a lot of feel-good America stories, and that's great. And if I wanted to do that, I'd watch ABC. I don't need to watch Tony DeCopel. The only thing I watch on CBS from now on, literally 60 Minutes, just to see how they handle things, because I feel bad for the journalists there, because I feel like they're trying their very best, but we'll see how long that lasts. If they're not going to continue to do it, then they're not going to do it.
This is a cultural question. How old were you when you came to the U.S.?
7.
So, what network news show did you end up watching with your family?
Peter Jennings.
So it was ABC Family, right?
Was
So my
ABC.
wife's an ABC family. I was an NBC family. We were a
Yeah.
Huntley Brinkley family, right? It's like
Oh,
Colgate versus Crest,
yep.
right?
I'll
It's
go
it's
step
Coke
further.
versus Pepsi.
I would feel guilty if I ever watched. I would feel like I was cheating on Peter Jennings if I watched NBC.
Yeah, yeah.
Very strange. I mean, I literally, if I ever flipped over to the other, and we were religious nightly news watchers, but if ever we flipped over, and you really didn't flip, then you'd go over and change the dial, I would feel very, very, very guilty about it. Like Peter Jennings would somehow know I was cheating on him.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Neither of us watched CBS back in the day.
No, and I like Dan Rather. I don't know why. I don't know why Peter Jennings. I think Peter Jennings was just the person we started watching, and that's who we ended up watching. I mean, he was very good, and um, it's kind of interesting in a generation how much all of that has shifted.
Well, it's just interesting too how the strength of those brands as networks, as shows, and as anchors
Yeah,
is gone. It doesn't matter that Tony DeCopel is on
nobody cares.
is an anchor. Who cares? Nobody cares.
No, I mean, good for him. He's making a ton of money, but nobody cares. And I don't know what Barry Weiss is trying to assemble. What I find fascinating is how the Free Press is now writing a hagiography of what the CBS Nightly News is doing, how it's, you're right on, right on. This is exactly what should be
Oh
happening.
God,
And I'm
I
like,
have a
oh
lot.
my God. Yeah. So I saw that somebody tweeted that out because I don't read the Free Press, but I was like, great. So Barry Weiss, Barry Weiss's online publication is complimenting Barry Weiss's network for doing what Barry Weiss wanted to do. Okay, great. But it's listen, to her credit, she's got a good scam going.
Oh yeah,
She
she's
really
had a
does.
good. I'm going. Yep.
Got a good scam going, and she left the Times in a blaze of glory. and started this thing. And I got to give her credit for starting the Free Press. And she had a lot of rich guys like Bill Ackman and others who were like, right on, we're going to, stick it to these wokesters. And anybody who thinks the New York Times is woke is on drugs. But that's how the Overton window keeps moving, right? If the New York Times is super woke, then maybe what's happening at Fox is not super right wing.
Exactly.
And that's how the window keeps moving. And it's you're kind of watching this, Jeff. I don't know if you have this. We'll wrap it up here, which is probably not a positive note to wrap it on, but
we don't have many positive notes
I
on
know,
our
but
discussions.
I really feel like as an observer, sometimes I think you live through history. You don't really realize you're living through history. I feel here like we're living through history, and I feel like I'm watching this car wreck, and I'm following it. I know it's happening, and I'm kind of observing it. Like you see the wreck happening before your eyes.
Yeah.
We're living through some crazy wreckage here, and that's before we even get to AI and everything else that's going to come of this.
And we're living through history. History does not repeat itself, but history teaches lessons. And we're living through a present history that is in the media is ignoring the past history, and that disturbs me every day.
Yes, and I don't understand what's so hard about making these comparisons. I think there are some things that we've just been taught not to do. We don't make comparisons to, communist Russia. We don't make comparisons to Nazi Germany. We don't make comparisons to what even Putin did when he came to power in the year 2000. We don't make comparisons to any of that, because to compare ourselves to that makes it seem like we voluntarily chose to be that. And the reality is we did. He won in a free and fair election, from what I can tell. And this is what we've chosen for ourselves. And, unfortunately for our friends around the world who watch us, and there are many here from all over the world who do watch us, I'm sorry, because it's not just we who chose for ourselves. We also chose for all of you.
Yes.
Because as we go, so goes the Western world. And not just the Western world, but as goes, you see what's happening in China now, where they're saber rattling because they can. Certainly you see what's happening in Ukraine now. And so it's, and our media kind of just sits there. It's almost like they're sitting there smoking a cigarette, kind of transcribing what's being told to them, rather than working. Like there's a malaise that's come upon them that I just don't understand.
It's that separation. My friend Jay Rosen at New York University talks about this, that the journalist wants to seem above it and separate from it. Former editors of the Washington Post used to say they didn't vote because that somehow made them they're non-human, right? At the same time, they want to be savvy, in Jay's terminology. They want to predict what's going on. They want to know everything about it and explain everything about it, but they don't explain. They don't know, and they can't predict.
Yeah.
And they're not even good stenographers now.
It's interesting. I taught for a very long time, I was on the board of the campaign school up at Yale, and I brought a very good friend who, this is now about 15 years ago, a very good friend who is a reporter for I'm not going to embarrass her because she's still a good friend, for a very, very sort of prominent news organization, to speak to these people who are running for office just about how to deal with the press and how to approach the press. She, with this very straight face, and she truly believes this and believed it then, said that we do our job with our fear or favor. We don't have political views. Or if we do, we stow them and we just write what we write. The entire room burst into laughter. Yeah. And there were people on both sides of the aisle there. This wasn't just Republicans doing it or just Democrats doing it. On both sides of the aisle burst into laughter. And she was like horrified. This is pre-Trump. She was like, what's so funny? And they were like, come on, haha, this is hilarious. Yeah. And I think the problem is that you have people who continue to this day to believe this, right? Even all these years later, even after Trump, after everything, that it's our job to call balls and strikes, without understanding that it's not that you just call balls and strikes anymore. It's how you frame the discussion. I used to always joke that Fox would have fair and balanced debates. The fair and balanced debates would be, is Barack Obama the worst president in the last 100 years, the last president, ever, discuss. And we'll have a fair and balanced debate about it. And when you set the paradigm to be what the paradigm is, then you're basically debating things on the terms that it's being set up to debate. And that's what the media, I think, seems to not understand, that when they get an assignment from their editor to write about Donald Trump's health, and that any conversations they had with experts or any conversations they had that don't include his genetic history, despite the fact that he obviously opened the door by introducing genetics, or when you write stories about how the post office is no longer no longer putting a postmark on the day that you drop something off, which means that effectively your ballots are not going to get there in time, your taxes aren't going to get there in time, and it's going to allow people in power to pick and choose who gets a pass and who doesn't. Whom does that benefit? That's not you being partisan. That is this president making things so partisan that you have no choice but to cover it in those terms. He's begging you to cover it from a partisan perspective, and you're not doing it.
I'm not doing it.
On that note, Jeff, anything else for the good of the order?
Well, happy friggin' New Year.
Yeah, happy New Year, everybody. 2026 is going to be, I don't know.
Just like the last one, I'm afraid, or even worse. But we'll be there watching with you.
We'll be there watching with you. And, if we have free and fair elections this November and we'll see what happens, we will be able to hopefully get a little bit of things back on track. But that would require having a Democratic Party that actually knows how to exercise power once they get it. All right. We will see everybody next week, I think, right? And on that note, Happy New Year, everybody. Have a wonderful day and have a great weekend. See you all next week. Bye, everybody.